A really great place to start is for an author to remember that not all authors are pursuing the same career goals in the same way. I think we're at a really excellent point now in terms of author awareness. Authors are coming to me and they know that they need a website, but not every author knows why they need a website, and they haven't always thought through their particular approach to being an author and how that differs from somebody else.
Hello, fellow creative voyagers. This week on the Indie Author Podcast, I talk with author and website designer Pauline Wiles about strategic website planning for authors. This conversation was prompted by my need to migrate my websites, mattydalrymple.com and theindieauthor.com, off Weebly, since Square, which owns Weebly, is phasing out support for Weebly. Pauline and I delve into the critical aspects of planning a website overhaul, such as understanding author goals, target readership, and key marketing tactics. She emphasizes the need to keep sites simple and user-friendly, and discusses tools and integrations that are effective for different types of authors. And now let's hear from Pauline Wiles about strategic website planning for authors. Hello, and welcome to the Indie Author Podcast. Today, my guest is Pauline Wiles. Hey, Pauline, how are you doing?
Hey, Matty, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
I am pleased to have you back. And Pauline Wiles is an author-turned-website designer who helps authors and solopreneurs with books create modern websites for strong business results. Her strategic approach delivers a powerful marketing asset that grows your audience and sells your books and services. British by birth, Pauline is now a contented resident of California, although she admits to an occasional yearning for afternoon teas and historic homes, both of which sound lovely. And I invited Pauline on the podcast to talk about author website migration planning, or the subtitle of this is Matty's Website Overhaul. So every once in a while, I have something come up and I have access to a wonderful expert like Pauline, and I decide I'm going to use myself as a test case. I think I last did this when I talked about keywords with Dave Cheston, and then I talked about how I had overhauled my own keywords as a result of that. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit at first. Normally, at this point, I just have the guest jump right in, but I'm going to give a little background for this conversation because earlier, actually, maybe even last year, so we're recording this in July of 2024, and I think maybe at the end of 2023, I got a message from Weebly, which is the site that I use to manage my website, that Square, the company who had purchased Weebly, was not committing to support the platform after the middle of 2025. And so I thought, oh, this is great. I'm going to get ahead of the curve. I'm going to decide, what I want to do with my website. And I have two websites. I actually have three websites, but one of them hardly counts. I have a website for AnnKinnear.com because my Ann Kinnear Suspense Novels occasionally make reference to Ann Kinnear's business website. And whenever there's a reference in the book about something on the website, I put it on this tiny, one-page website that I use basically just to drive people to my Matty Dalrymple site. I have my Matty Dalrymple site, which is quite basic, and I think very similar to what a lot of the listeners are going to have as author websites. And then I have a super complicated, INDYAUTHOR.com website, which we're not even going to get into today, because I thought it would be a good idea to start with the easier one, the Matty Dalrymple site, and move to the other one. So I started thinking through what I wanted, and what I was thinking was very, very tactical. So it was basically things that I liked or didn't like about my current tool. Like, I would have liked to have had a way to reuse components from one page to the other to make editing easier. I would like a sort of grid format to make it easier to arrange. So I was putting all this together. I made notes of this, and I was kind of bogged down about how to get started. And so I thought, oh, I know someone who knows all about websites. I'm going to call Pauline. And so I got in touch with Pauline, and I described what I was looking for. Like, I want a website builder tool that has a grid format. And she said, let's just take a step back here for a minute, because I was diving, as sometimes I do, I was diving right into the details, and I wasn't taking an opportunity to step back and look more strategically at it. So that is why I wanted to invite Pauline on the podcast, because I thought that conversation about my author website might be useful to other authors as well. So, Pauline, do you have any kind of strategic context setting that you'd like to share, or what's a good way to lead into this conversation?
Sure. Yeah. Well, we have a lot to unpack today, Matty. And yes, we'll be talking about your specific situation, and I'll do my best to give some signposting for how other authors can think about this as well. Whenever somebody comes to me, I love to start with the high-level questions, the website strategy, because many authors don't realize how different and how individual each of us as an author can be. And therefore, that has a huge impact on the type of website and the features and functions on the website that will serve you well. Mm-hmm. And many times an author, they might know you, for example, Matty, you are very experienced, you're pretty technical, you've been doing this for many years. You have a pretty good idea of what you want your website to do for you. But as a website designer, especially if somebody comes to me and we don't already know each other, I have to kind of uncover, well, what kind of author are you? Because you, Matty, I would characterize as a career author. That means many books, very businesslike. Selling books is your main author income. But of course, we also have first-time authors who are just looking to get their website online and establish a professional presence. We have a key type of client of mine, which is authors who own a service-based business and they're writing one book as a lead generation tool. And then we have authors who also cross over into services. And in a way, Matty, I think you're in this camp as well because of all your activities under the umbrella of the INDYAUTHOR.com. And so the goals can be quite different as to whether somebody is primarily looking at selling books as the revenue source, or selling a book or even giving away a book as a way to introduce clients to a service business, or indeed just getting started and just dipping their toe in the water of what an author website means and can do for a publishing career. So that's one reason I like to ask a lot of questions at this stage. And then the other reason is, by the time many authors come to me, they've usually absorbed quite a lot of information on things that they should be doing. And you and I have had great conversations before, and I know other guests on your podcast have gone into depth on the angle of there are so many things an author can do to promote books. You can't be doing everything. Therefore, I need to make sure that I'm building a website that lines up with your goals for how you want to run your business, but also the way that you are realistically going to market your books.
Yeah.
So, for example, Matty, before this conversation, you gave me some good information on your marketing tactics. So a focus on paid advertising right now. Another author might be coming to me saying that they're dying to go and speak to book clubs or land speaking events, which is a good moment to plug your upcoming book about authors who want to go out and speak. What's the title of that? Remind everybody.
You're such a good sport, Pauline. It is From Page to Platform, How to Succeed as an Author Speaker, which is a book that I co-authored with Michael Aran. And those kind of offerings are definitely why my Indie Author podcast, as you pointed out, is much, much more complicated than my Matty Dalrymple podcast, because that's the place where I would want to be publicizing a book, just as I would on my Matty Dalrymple site. But along with that could come, oh, do you want a speaking engagement about speaking engagements? Or, I have a consulting service helping people position themselves as an author speaker, all those auxiliary things that would definitely come into play with the indie author would be surrounding that kind of book.
Yeah, fantastic. So there are lots of different ways of going about marketing a book. And really, I like to have a nice, supportive and friendly conversation with my authors to say, realistically, what is book marketing going to look like for you, the author? And therefore, let me build a website that supports you in that. And I don't then want to set up a load of features and technology and functions that the author then either has no idea how to use or is just overwhelmed by and feels guilty because they're not keeping up with all the things.
Well, I think it might be useful to talk about the pages on my site, like where I stand now, and then what I expect when I go to an author site. Like if I put on my hat of somebody visiting my site, what I would expect. So over time for mattydalrymple.com, I've tried different things. So for example, I now have 10 novels. And across those 10 novels, they are normally set in one of three locations, either my home base around Philadelphia, on Mount Desert Island, Maine, or in Sedona, Arizona. And so for a while, I thought it would be fun. What if I had a page on each of those locations, and it would have maybe like some fun facts about the location or what my connection was to it and things like that. And then it would feature the books that were specific to that location. which I think theoretically is a good idea. And every once in a while, like I would be going to Maine for a vacation, and I would put a post up saying, "Oh, my husband and I are going on our yearly vacation to Maine. If you like Maine, here are some books. You click here to find some books that are set in Maine." But I just found that my guess about how much promotional fodder that was providing to me, and this is another thing we might want to talk about. This is totally a guess. I'm not basing this on any data. Was that the time it took me to maintain those pages? Like every time a new book came out, I had to remember to go put it on the page that was appropriate for its geography. It just wasn't paying me back. And so, preparatory to this conversion, one of the things I did is I went through my site and I got rid of all the stuff that I felt was extraneous.
Mm.
And so, basically, what that left me with was a homepage, which I don't find very inspirational. Everybody can go to my website and check this out. An about and contact page, which is very useful for people learning about me and getting in touch with me, signing up for my email newsletter. I have pages for each of my books that have, clickable sales links and the blurb and reviews and things like that. I have an events page, which is the page I use the most because I actually use that for any author event or speaker event, whether it's to do with my Matty Dalrymple platform or the Indie Author platform. So I'm in there weekly, at least, updating that. And a press kit page that has my bios, my headshots, and my social media links. And I could even see opportunities for skinnying it down even more than that, because what I expect when I go to a fiction author site is basically I'm looking for a retailer agnostic list of their works and a high level of detail. So like I don't want to have to go to barnesandnoble.com or amazon.com or some retail site to find their books. I like going one place that they own where I can get the full list. I like having links to their active social media accounts in case I want to follow them. The author events I find useful because that's what I want to know about authors I follow. Where are they going to be and where can I see them? The bios and headshots and the email newsletter. But what I don't expect as a visitor to these sites is to spend much time on them. I'm just going there for a very specific piece of information. I don't expect to have any kind of interaction with the author on their site. And I generally don't expect to buy from their site. And so I'm kind of trying to balance what I expect as a visitor with the experience I want the visitors to my site to have.
Yeah. So you're looking at a website migration, and oftentimes when an author is preparing to migrate, they've got some track record, some history. They've got a sense of how their readers are interacting. And you, Matty, you prefer, if you're interacting with readers, to do it on social media, not on your website.
Yes.
Ideally, by this stage of a project like this, we would have some actual data and analytics to know how are people using your website. I think you said to me in our gathering of information that you're not really digging into website analytics at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. I'm always very skeptical of data. I think it's the ends in my way sometimes. I mean, in some cases, I think it's good to be skeptical of data. But I remember early on in my author career when I first had a website up and I discovered the analytics page. And I went on there and it had information like clicks in the last week or something like that. And it was something like 750 clicks. I was like, there's not a chance in the world that 750 people clicked on my website. It could be, I don't know, web crawlers or something like that. And that's just one example, but the data I saw there just didn't make any common sense to me. I mean, it made me feel good because the numbers were way higher than I truly believe reflected what my understanding of that metric was. But it kind of sullied my attitude because now I'm like, yeah, sure, I could look at the analytics, but it's not going to tell me anything because they're all overblown or whatever. But I'm relying on you to set me straight on that.
Yeah, well, leaving aside the different measurement methods, it can give some good insight. For example, you said you're not sure that your time spent in updating the pages that are destination or location specific, you're not sure that that's really bringing you much in the way of visitor engagement. that's the kind of thing that even if you're not super confident about your overall levels of visitor traffic, you can do some comparisons to see which pages are more visited than others. Especially if you're looking at retiring pages, that can be a useful thing, especially if it feels a bit scary to retire a website page. It can be nice to know that your hunch is backed up. And then I would have some additional questions for you in thinking about your website pages. Yes, I think you're quite right that you can translate what you expect as a reader when you go to a fiction author's website. You can use that as your guide for what you would like your website to do for your readers. Questions I would ask you include, how many more books are coming in the world of these protagonists? Are you done, or could there be many, many more?
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, there could be many. So definitely, I mean, I'm working on book 5 of the Lizzy Ballard Thrillers now. I kind of think that that's going to wrap up with 6. Spoiler alert! But I imagine that there could be another series that spins off from that with one of the secondary characters. And then the Ann Kinnear novels are kind of my wheelhouse series, so I can't anticipate how many of those there will be, but there will definitely be more.
Definitely be more, yeah, because we get to a point as a multi-published author where it's unlikely to be sustainable to have a separate page for every book on your website. Mm-hmm. If you think forward to when you've got 50 novels like this, are you going to have 50 website pages, one for each novel? Probably not. You're more likely to focus on, this is a series, these are all the titles in the series, here's some information about getting started in the series, here's the order that you should read in. So you do have the discretion to move away from showing every single book on its own page.
I like that. And I can imagine each one would be, a cover image, the buy links, the description, maybe one review quote or something like that. Now that I have individual pages for each book, I have other things like book club questions and things like that, which I could probably just consolidate somewhere else.
Yeah. And then another question, I think I know the answer for you, Matty, but it's a really great one for listeners to think about, is what is your level of technical comfort, and will you be looking after your author website yourself? Will you have help? Is it the kind of thing that you already said that your author events page is the one that you're likely to update the most often? But in creating any kind of website, and indeed an author website, having some idea of, well, who will be on the hook for keeping it fresh and up to date, that can also be really good information for the type of tool that we create.
Yeah, I would definitely want to maintain it myself. I would definitely choose self-maintainability over like sophistication. So I've been using Weebly for years. There was a brief period of time when I had my INDYAUTHOR.com site on WordPress, and I just found it very clunky to use. I like the what you see is what you get kind of thing. And I wouldn't like to either pay for or wait for someone else to make the kind of tweaky changes that generally I have to make. I mean, definitely for MattyDalrymple.com, the changes are basically when I launch a book or when I have a new event to add. So yeah, I would definitely want to be maintaining it myself.
Yeah. So I think it's really great for every author to know where they are likely to be on that spectrum.
Yep.
Because there's no point somebody like me creating something very whizzy that you and cannot maintain and just feels like a burden.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that in the earlier podcast episode that we had talking more generally about author websites, and I'll provide a link to that in the show notes for this episode, that idea that even the expectations of design now, if you look at some sites and they're very busy and they have like lots of sidebars and things like that, and they're sort of identifiably old tech or old design because of that. I like that idea of making it very clean looking and plain, both visually. I think that's an attractive look, and also because it makes it really easy if you have to, if you have to move it or you have to make changes, it's just nicer.
Yeah. And then I think as a fiction author, you can give yourself a lot of freedom for simplifying your website. I wouldn't give this same advice to every type of author. So particularly the business owner who has one book to bring in leads for the business, that person will need evidence on their website as to why they are an expert at what they do and how to work with them. And even if they don't call it a blog, some articles or evergreen information to give their visitors more of a sense of the expertise that lies behind the website and that this person can vouch for. You, on the other hand, you can certainly check with your audience and your readers, but the chances are most people that come to your website, they've discovered you some way, either through your wonderful speaking activities or they've read one of the books, and they're coming to check you out and to see what else you have available. And so your goals narrow down then to the very pure author goals, if you like, of show them how to buy the next book and get them on your email list. You're not necessarily positioning your author website as the one where you're pitching for media opportunities and collaborations with other authors and all the other forms of book marketing that might make sense for an author with different goals and different preferences.
Yep. I did have another tactical question about email lists. Do you have advice about things like pop-ups? Like, how overt should the plea for people's emails be on a website?
So in general terms, here's what we know. Number one, pop-ups work. Number two, not many of us will say that we like them. So at the risk of bringing the conversation back around to analytics again, this is a lovely place where you might want to set things up in one or two different ways and test and see what kind of results you get. So a conversation we haven't yet had, Matty, is about the other tools that your website needs to integrate with. I know, for example, that you use Aweber for your email marketing, your email list. You also mentioned that you've got PayHip going on for selling direct. A really great conversation before diving too deep into a website project is to just confirm for me, if you're staying with Aweber, then that's good information. And given all that you've got in mind to tackle with a website migration, I would actually suggest if Aweber is working for you, you're happy with it, you like it, then good. Stick with that. Don't feel the need to change that at the same time.
Yeah, I think the only integrations I have are I do have Aweber sign up widgets or whatever you would call them. And in general, I'm linking to other sites. So for example, I do sell books on PayHip, but on each book page, I just have a link that would take people to PayHip. And I am kind of feeling like that feels good to me. Like, I think for a while, the recommendation was author websites should be kind of a one-stop shop and everything should sort of be embedded in it. But I'm quite happy sending people to PayHip or sending them to other sites. I can't even think of any other sort of auxiliary applications like that. Again, as opposed to the Indie Author, where I have all sorts of links. Like I have Calendly meeting scheduling links embedded in the pages and things like that. But yeah, there are not very many integrations with mattydalrymple.com, and all the things that I am linking to are things that I would plan to continue using.
Yeah, great. So that was a little diversion before I come back to your question about pop-ups and email lists. That is a really critical thing for other authors to think about, because certainly when choosing a website tool, whether it integrates with and plays nicely with other tools that are essential for running your author business the way that you want to run it, that can be a big decision factor. So in terms of your site and pop-ups, Aweber almost certainly provides you with the option to have an embedded sign-up form like the one that you've got in your footer, or the pop-up option where a website visitor is presented with a rather more obvious choice for joining your email list and your newsletter. What I would suggest, two things. So you can certainly set up a pop-up, almost certainly using Aweber, that will then display on your website. And when that's been running a while, you'll be able to get some good information along the lines of, well, how many people saw the embedded form and took action? How many people saw the pop-up and took action? And my own experience has been that the pop-up usually will win the day, even though none of us say that we like them.
Yeah.
And so the way around that is the so-called polite pop-up, where we really keep in mind what's the visitor's experience like on the website, and we don't have our pop-up behave then in an obnoxious way that none of us would enjoy. So what that means is we don't show the pop-up as soon as they land on your website, because they've only just arrived. They've no idea if they like you or not, or if you're the right Matty Dalrymple, or whether they resonate with your genre. So set a time delay so that pop-up doesn't come up immediately. Consider whether the pop-up should come up on every page. For example, some authors have a dedicated page where a newsletter sign-up can happen. And that's kind of double duty then to have a sign-up page and a pop-up that's getting in the way. And then most tools, and I'm sure Aweber is no different, most tools allow you to say, don't keep showing the pop-up on every single page after somebody has dismissed it. If a visitor has been to your site and they come back the next day, then maybe don't show the pop-up, for several days until they come back and they've probably forgotten that they saw it. All kinds of ways of having the pop-up be a little more human and considerate, even if you are in fact using that as a tool.
Yeah. I know in the questionnaire that you have your clients fill out that I saw and panicked, and I said, I know, Pauline, let's talk about it on a podcast instead. One of the questions was regarding books and author goals. So we've been talking a little bit about, the specific goals that an author might have with regard to their website. But are there more general considerations? Like what I found, the reason that I kind of panicked when I saw the questions is that I understood all the questions you were asking, the importance of understanding your author goals, the importance of understanding your target readership, your understanding of your own platform or your business operations. But I was having a really hard time translating my general understanding of those things to how it would impact on the website.
Why should you care?
So, why should I care with regard to my website specifically? And so the first one was my books and author goals. And so talk me through a little bit about what are the things authors should be considering as they're considering their website related to their books and their author goals.
Yeah, so a really great place to start is for an author to remember that not all authors are pursuing the same career goals in the same way. I think we're at a really excellent point now in terms of author awareness. Authors are coming to me and they know that they need a website, but not every author knows why they need a website, and they haven't always thought through their particular approach to being an author and how that differs from somebody else. So a great example, Matty, for why I ask extensive questions like that. You and I have talked before about whether authors should blog. And generally I come down on the side, that's a long conversation, but generally I come down on the side of a fiction author, maybe not, especially if the blog is there for search engine optimization purposes and to be found through search engines. So you, for example, as a fiction author, you're writing in series, you're paying for advertising, you've already got some fairly honed processes for how you're finding your readers. I ask questions like that to clarify, is this an author who should be considering having a blog on their website? Especially if they think that the blog is going to work magic with Google bringing them new readers, or would I be better advising them to post guest articles on other websites, engage with readers in other places, and generally approach things in a different way? You had a great conversation not so long ago with Melissa Addy, who was with you to talk about results of an indie author study that had been done.
Yep.
So things that came out of that, things like writing in series Again, if I'm talking to you, Matty, then we're going to be thinking very much, how does the website support your goals as a series author? Whereas somebody else might come to me, they've written their memoir, they're probably a one-book author, they're thrilled to bits, they want to be professional, they want to be online, but their book marketing tactics then will be different. And then there's that good old question of selling direct to readers. Yeah, fine, you're on PayHip. Definitely, if that's working for you and you're loving that, continue in that approach. I know Melissa shared in her interview with you that selling direct is a hot topic now among indie authors. And I'm having plenty of conversations with authors who are exploring providers like Book Vault to facilitate them being able to sell direct with print books and print on demand. And Book Vault are even rumoring that box sets may be coming to the print on demand market. So these are the kind of questions that I love to dig into, because they tell me a lot more about what type of author am I talking to, how are their business goals as an author likely to play out, what can I mention to them as opportunities, and what should I be gently encouraging them not to pin their hopes on for publishing success.
Would you have different advice if a person's direct sales focus was on ebooks versus print? So for me, I always like to send people to PayHip for my ebooks, but I'm really not interested in getting into the fulfillment side of things too deeply. So recently, because I had a flood in my house and all my print books got destroyed anyway, so I took all my print books off my PayHip store, and I thought, like, for the rare times that I would get orders for a paperback, it didn't seem worth it. But so that's a PayHip question. But do you advise different things if the person, depending on the format, the person is focusing on selling direct?
Yes, yeah, I do. And again, this splits into two main flavors. Several of my clients love to be able to keep some books at home, and when an order comes in, they sign and personalize the book and they ship it out themselves. So that good old fun trek to the post office that we all love. And then other authors are asking me now about, well, what about print on demand and fulfillment, where they, as the author, don't have to be involved at all, but the reader makes a purchase and then the book is printed and sent to them without the author having to be hands-on. So yes, there is different advice in those quarters. And this is where it really does pay to think about the integrated tools that are needed, because my research so far tells me that authors who want to use something like Book Vault do need to be aware about their website tool for how those two will talk to each other.
And do you have any insight into the results of sending people to another site? Like, it's easier if I just put a PayHip button on my book page and send them to PayHip, but I realize that I may be losing other benefits by capitalizing on the simplicity benefits of doing that, rather than having it more embedded in the website. Yeah.
So I always come back to the principle that if you need to keep something simple in order for it to happen, then that's the way to do it. I say with an author email tool or a newsletter tool, the best one is the one that you'll actually use. If sending people to PayHip keeps you sane and you find that that's working fine for you, then absolutely. A little bit of technical encouragement. A company like PayHip does make it reasonably easy to give the appearance of embedding your bookshop on your own website. But what I would really boil this down to, Matty, is the question of, are you able to harvest those email addresses from the PayHip transaction to have permission to stay in touch with those purchasers?
Yeah. Just to answer that question, I do. So we're delving a little bit into one of the later questions, which was related to business operations. Does it make sense to talk in more detail about that, about what you look for to advise your clients there?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. So questions that I love to ask at this stage, we've talked about a lot of them. It's about, are you making updates yourself? Are you technical enough to do that? Have you looked at analytics in order to understand what you can from a current website? And then being very conscious about if there are other related author tools that are critical to how you want to run your business, be it selling direct or a newsletter tool, just being very aware that that can actually drive a decision on website technology. And I don't say that with an entirely happy heart, because I'm a Squarespace specialist, and not all of the tools that my author clients love play nicely with Squarespace. But in terms of advising what's best, then I like to be very conscious of what are the other tools that need to play in this ecosystem.
Yeah.
And I was going to stress for the indie author that I characterize as the career author. So that's the type of person who does plan to write multiple books, is certainly paying attention to how the book catalogue as a whole can interact and support itself, more so than the debut author or somebody who isn't quite sure how many books they have ahead of them in their career.
Yeah. And I think it's also interesting to think about it in terms of streams of income. So when I think of mattydalrymple.com, it's basically the stream of income it's representing our book sales and paving the way to book sales. When I think about the indie author, it's representing book sales and the podcast and consulting services and speaking engagements. And each of those it requires a separate assessment and then thinking through how to meld them together nicely.
And there's even the extreme case, for the professional business owners who have one book. They might even be best served by giving that book away, knowing that it will then lead to multi-figure contracts for other work.
Yep, absolutely. So we talked a little bit about business operations. There's also the topic of the current author platform as a whole. Are there any topics we haven't hit with regard to that?
No, I think we've talked about this idea of there are many, many ways to market the book. There are things that make sense for the business model that the author is pursuing. And then there are individual preferences for how people want to interact with readers. Is paid advertising a good tactic like you are pursuing, or are there other channels that the author is looking for? And what role, if anything, does search engine optimization play?
Yeah. Search engine optimization is definitely something that I'm much more focused on for the indie author. And that's one of the reasons that I've been publishing either transcripts or summaries of the podcast. I'll have to go dive into the analytics and see if I can figure out if that's helping or not. But there again, my goal with search engine optimization, my tiny little goal is just like if someone searches for The Falcon and the Owl, they'll find my book.
Yeah.
And then I guess this should be the most obvious question to answer, but it was actually is one of the tougher ones, is that one of the considerations obviously is your readers. And so talk a little bit about in what way should authors be thinking about their readership as they're thinking about their website design?
Well, you touched on a nice angle earlier that you say as a reader yourself, you don't really expect to interact with the author on their website. If you're interacting with an author, you'll do it somewhere else, like on a social media platform. Mm-hmm. Not all readers may feel that way. And again, the author's preference may be very much to channel reader engagement through the website versus not through social media. And I think that really is a case of that intersection between the preference from the author and the realistic understanding of where are readers hanging out and where are readers willing to engage. Mm-hmm. But for example, I have one client, his only social media presence is LinkedIn, but he regularly publishes blog posts on his website and he gets a really nice level of engagement and comments on the blog posts there. And yeah, that's very different then from other preferences, authors who are, regularly showing up on Book Talk and Bookstagram to interact with readers.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask a question more generally. So I'll post the question, and then you can tell me if this is a good point to talk about that, or if there are other things we should delve into with regard to my website specifically. But the question is going to be: my change was spurred by the fact that I was told that my website might not be supported after next year. That's a pretty compelling reason, but I've been kind of thinking that maybe I should be moving toward a more frequently updated platform. I think that when Square purchased Weebly, they just stopped investing much money in it because, bugs that I saw 5 years ago are still bugs now. What are the other things that you think should trigger an author to take that step back and say, I've had my website out there for a year, 5 years, 10 years, however long, I really need to rethink it? What are the strategic considerations there?
I think there are all kinds of reasons that can prompt this. An author like you, there might be some technical impetus for needing to do this. Oftentimes when clients come to me, they've stumbled on some technical piece of their current website platform. And a lot like when our car breaks down for some kind of minor reason, for some of us, that's the last straw. And we decide, we're trading this in and we're looking for a different way of getting around. So for some authors, it can be quite a a smallish technical hurdle that then gets them thinking about, is this even the platform that they want to be on? Other times, I think a big catalyst for authors is a change in publishing circumstances. So that can be the book deal for folks who are going a traditional or hybrid direction. It might even be an author who thought they were only going to write one book and that went well, and they've decided they're going to jump in with gusto. Or equally, authors come to me because they just get the sense that the website could be doing a lot more for them. For example, they may have hired an expert for search engine optimization and been told that really they need to have a complete rethink. There can be lots of different reasons. I interviewed a client recently for a case study, and she has a fascinating business where she helps people make decisions for her living. And I said to her, how does an author decide if it's or how does a business owner decide if it's time for a new website? And her answer surprised me. She said, if you think you need a new website, you probably do. So that was not the answer I was expecting, but
That's a pretty good answer, though. I like that.
Her take on it was, if you're starting to wonder, then you probably do.
Yeah, there's something going on there that's finally triggering the decision. Yeah.
But I think this is a great time to turn to more tactical considerations, Matty, if you feel that we've kind of talked about some of the big picture things that can inform the smaller tactical decisions.
Yeah, well, I think that obviously I'd want to ponder on this a bit, but I like the idea of getting my current website, again, because it's quite simple, getting it as cleaned up in Weebly as I can before I try to do a migration, because I just don't want to migrate something I'm not going to use. I remember years ago helping a friend move. This friend had like boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of books, and I and my other friends were helping her move. We finally slogged all these books to her new place, and we were all sitting around drinking a beer or whatever. And she said, well, I'm glad I'm finally going to have a chance now to look through all the boxes and see what books I want to get rid of. And I'm like, seriously? You're making that decision now? Couldn't you have done that earlier? So I think getting rid of the stuff that I know I don't want to carry forward will make the migration simpler. I do like the idea of jettisoning some of the things that I put out there just because at some point I heard it was a good idea, like a list of book club questions, and having it be basically a list of books per series, a page per series with some skinny down information. On the theory that if I clean it up and I move it and then I decide to start adding stuff back in, I'd rather do it on the new platform than the old platform.
And one thing I would offer to you is keep in mind, not every page has to be featured in your main header menu. So even if you think a page of book club questions for the the fiction would be a nice thing to have. You don't have to kind of make a big thing and advertise it right at the top of the website. That can be a resource or a page that people click through to if they need it.
Yeah. Here's another really tactical question. What do you recommend people put on the homepage? Because now I think like a lot of the information that's on the homepage is just repetitive of stuff that's elsewhere. Like, what are my series? There's really nothing there. What would you recommend I put on my homepage?
Yeah, so I'll answer the question in general terms and then specifically for you. This is a great example of where the type of author and the type of author goals are going to be essential for that decision. For a fiction author with multiple books published, again, coming back to our framework that most of your website visitors have come across you somewhere and they're coming to check you out and see what you have available. I think your homepage serving as a high-level view of these are Matty's books, this is what's available, click if you need more information, click if you're ready to buy. Your homepage, I think, can be very simple as primarily showcasing what books you have available, perhaps feature your latest release at the top, a little bit of information about you, the author, and of course, that wonderful opportunity that they shouldn't miss to join your email list. And on your website, when I took a look earlier, I do think there's an opportunity for you to switch around the wording when people are thinking of joining your email list, so that you make more of a big deal about the fact that they get a free story.
Oh, that's a great point.
So certainly making a bigger splash of get your free story here, and you'll also receive other author news and wonderful things. That's always worth remembering, that dangle that carrot for readers, certainly.
Yeah, I'm sure that I did that. I probably kept it very simple because I didn't want to have to remember to go back and update it when the reader magnet changed. I didn't want to forget that it was out there and then they get something different than they expect. But again, that's a benefit. If it's simple enough, then you know the 25 pieces of information that are out there and it's easy to remember to go fix it.
And then other authors, it might be very different. A first-time author, of course, will probably showcase the book and point readers to the 2 or 3 actions that would really help that author. And then non-fiction authors, whether or not they've got one book or multiple books, they'll want their homepage to position them much more as they're an expert in whatever. They work with people by doing this, that, the other, about them, and then some invitations to either learn more about their expertise, or in many cases, the action that they are prioritizing on the website is to schedule some kind of consultation call or fill out an intake form or something that gets that working relationship underway.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to loop back with you when we get to the indie author, because that's going to be a hot mess. Well, this has all been so great, Pauline. And I think a lot of people probably will have been listening along and trying to decide, seeing how this applies to them. And what would your advice be generically for me and for those other folks who are thinking through this? What would be next steps for paving the way to a successful website migration?
Yes, in general, I would say to people, if they're considering a website migration, definitely know yourself as an author and your author goals, because that informs the type of marketing that you're likely to want to do. And that in itself is the key direction for what you need on your author website. And definitely pay attention to the integrations that are necessary, because you might fall in love with a particular website tool, but then find it doesn't play nicely with something else that's key for your business. And then I think I said to you when we first kicked off this conversation by email, don't believe all the hype from a website tool that migrating is easy. My experience as a business owner, whenever I'm changing tools, is that the tool of choice always says it's going to be easy and smooth and quick to get up and running. And there usually are a few devils in the details. So I love it, Matty, that you're giving yourself some time. I'm a big advocate for sign up for a free plan, give it a try, do a mini migration and see how it actually feels when you're working with real information. Because unfortunately, migrating is rarely a piece of cake.
And I'll just ask, based on what we've been discussing for mattydalrymple.com, is there a particular tool that you think would be a good fit for me based on what I've said?
So you've got the INDYAUTHOR.com as well as mattydalrymple.com and indeed AnnKinnear.com. And you did raise a question in one of our preparation pieces about should you be aiming to have your websites using the same technology and the same tool, or would it be okay to have different websites? My answer to that is very few people, I think, have got the bandwidth and the technical skill to be juggling two different website tools for two different websites that support their business. I actually do it. I have my website design business on Squarespace, and then my books do actually sit on a very simple website platform called Card. But I feel like I'm a rare case where I've got the bandwidth and the technical enthusiasm to manage two different websites. And I'll let you know a secret. I'm not actually keeping the books website very fresh at all. That kind of sits there and it does its thing. And Amazon sends me pocket money every month. So for you, in terms of a tool, my caution for you is, unless you can kind of convince me otherwise and you have a lot of appetite for working with different technologies, I think there might be a lot of good reason for you to get your Matty Dalrymple website on the same tool that you plan to use for the Indie Author. And although we don't want to delve into the complications of the Indie Author website today, you and I had previously swapped some information, and because that is such a big migration project, I think your destination tool for the Indie Author will in fact inform where your website platform is going to land up. It's almost, I feel like you almost have three children and you're trying to choose a school for them to attend. And I'm sort of saying to you as another parent, your life will be a lot simpler if all three kids are in the same school and you can just drop off in one place each morning and know how that school runs things and what you need to do. And then it almost becomes a case of, well, which child has the needs that are going to be most difficult to satisfy, and therefore, do we choose a school on that basis?
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I love that. So I have lots of homework to do, and I think our listeners have lots of homework to do as well. And Pauline, thank you so much for lending your expertise to my website situation. And please let everyone know where they can go to find out more about you and everything you do online.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, the best place to find me is my website, paulinewiles.com. And what we did today in this discussion really was a subset of my strategy process, where I invite authors to work with me to figure out the strategic part of a website before we start deciding what to build and how. So that service indeed is mentioned on the website. And yeah, thank you, Matty. This was a great conversation. Always great to talk to you. And thank you for the somewhat complex case study of your three different websites to talk about.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thank you, Pauline. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Pauline. Pauline's going to be helping me with my transition from Weebly to Squarespace, creating the website structure for me to populate. And in the meantime, I'm cleaning up my Weebly mattydalrymple.com site in preparation for the transition. For example, for ease of maintenance, Pauline recommended that I consolidate all my book club questions to one page rather than having the questions related to a particular book on that particular page, so I've done that. And as a side note, I discovered that if I prompted ChatGPT to give me 6 questions related to a specific book that could be used for a book club discussion, it did a great job, and it had clearly read all the books, since the questions were very specific to each book's plot, characters, and so on. And if you'd like to check those out, you can go to mattydalrymple.com and then click on For Book Clubs. Did any of Pauline's advice make you think about changes you'd like to make to your website? If you don't yet have a website, did our discussion prompt you to think about creating one? I would love to hear your thoughts. Just leave a comment on YouTube, and while you're at it, please subscribe. And if you got value from this episode and were thinking, I wish I could buy Matty a cup of coffee, you can do that. Scroll to the bottom of any page at theindyauthor.com and click Buy Me a Coffee. Until next time, here's wishing you favorable winds and smooth sailing on your creative voyage.